Hello fellow Earthlings, it's me, Robin. I get a lot of questions about animation and CG from people wondering about what sort of roles there are in the industry for them, what sort of career goals they should be aiming for, what sort of positions may suit them in the industry, and if you're wondering about the same sorts of things, then this video will probably help you. I get questions like, do you need to be able to draw to be an animator? Which I've already done a video on, so if you are wondering about that, then check it out in the link in whichever corner it pops up in. Or, I love animation but I'm not visually artistic, how can I be involved in the animation industry? Or, I love drawing but I can't draw characters, can I still work in animation? I love writing and creating stories for animation, what could my role be? People often don't realize that to be involved in the animation and CG industry, there are a lot more job roles and options than just animator. If you're passionate about the CG industry or you want to be involved in animation production, then you should know that there are so many options and positions and roles out there that you will definitely find something that will suit you. Of course, there are other types of animators like stop motion animators or VFX artists or motion graphics designers. You don't only need to think about 2D and 3D character animators. And these branches of animation further branch out because these animators need a support system of other artists and creatives and producers and team members. It's like a tree where the final animation is the fruit, the final beautiful product that everyone consumes. But behind that is this complex network of people and roles that all contribute. And don't make the mistake of thinking that the only jobs available to people in the CG industry or animators are in movies or games or animated series. There is plenty of work in digital media, commercials and marketing and content for corporates and social media, the medical industry, virtual and augmented reality, fashion, architecture, engineering, the list goes on. So if you don't live in a place where there are big animation studios like DreamWorks or Pixar or whatever, there are still plenty of other opportunities available, and not everyone actually wants to work on stuff like films and series. There are tons of possibilities out there for you. So I'm going to go through the different roles and careers for people in the animation and CG industry so you can take a look and see what actually suits you and your strengths and your interests. Some of these roles are not directly involved in the creation of the visuals of the animation, so if you're not actually a visually creative person, you'll see that there are still places for you in the animation industry. There are timestamps for each role, so if you already have an idea of what you want to know about, then you can skip ahead to those, but otherwise it might be a good idea just to watch the whole video so you can get a better understanding of the ecosystem of animation production, and maybe you'll learn about a role or position that you didn't actually previously know about that could be perfect for you. So firstly, as I already mentioned, animators, the term animator, doesn't only concern people who are making the characters move. There are other types of animators in the industry. So let me talk about those for a bit. VFX artists. These are the people making rad effects for live action filmed footage, putting the pieces together to create an awesome final product. It can be further broken down into roles like matte painters, rotoscope artists, 3D match moving, paint artists, compositing artists, VFX supervisor. They can create particle effects, dynamic simulations, shader effects, do rotoscoping, and just generally those really cool effects you see in movies or commercials or TV shows, like something bursting into flames or magic effects or whatever. Compositors are also part of VFX, and they take the various layers of project material and put them together into the final product. Their job often involves making sure levels are consistent, adding motion blur, matching colors, finishing shadows, rotoscoping and keying where necessary. And they're basically the ones that take everything, put it together and polish it up really nicely to see that final product that you guys go and see in the cinemas or on TV. Motion graphics artists or motion designers are animators, but they don't necessarily use characters to tell a story. They use things like kinetic text and visual effects and create things like title sequences and moving graphics, logo reveals, infographics, basically anything that's designed in motion. They create really cool, slick looking moving visuals, and most digital media that is not just a still design makes use of motion graphics. If you have a good eye for design and composition, then this is probably a really good role for you. I have done a video on how to become a motion graphics designer or motion graphics artist if you want to check that video out to further learn more about it. Scriptwriters. Animated content needs to start somewhere. You can't just sit down and start animating without any form of guidance or structure. Before you have an animatic, before you have a storyboard, before you have designs or any sorts of visuals or assets, you need a script. You get script writers who are scriptwriters specifically for animation, because writing for animation is a little bit different than writing for live action. For live action, the director will interpret what is written in the script for the actors to portray in terms of actions and conveying emotion, whereas a scriptwriter for animation will put those details into the script. You could be that person to put down those ideas and write that story that gets animated. If you're good at writing and you have original ideas, if you're good at communicating and conveying emotion and explaining how things should happen, then this could be a really good role for you. Next, you have concept artists. They conceptualize and develop the look and visual style. It's literally the foundation of what everything will look like, and they'll work with the director and producer to develop it in detail. The artwork is used by the animators and environment artists and character designers to build the assets and world off of. It's that first exploration of how everything is going to look and can be used in pitches to sell a project before production has even started. There are several stages to developing the concept art, and it'll start out with simple passes and sketches and progress with feedback and input from producers, directors, and other members of the team. Final concept art is usually quite detailed and beautifully polished. A concept artist is not a production artist, and the concept artworks are not used as assets in the final animation. A production artist will work off what the concept artist has created to develop the artworks and assets that will be used in the animation. If you're good at developing visual concepts and visually communicating ideas, and you're very skilled at drawing and illustration, then this could be a really good role for you. Next is character designers. This team develops the designs for the characters that you'll see in an animation, sometimes all the way through concept creation to assisting in the modeling process. They'll work with the creative or art director to conceptualize and develop the characters, and will need to create many iterations with expression sheets and different angles and outfits for the modeling and rigging team. They'll need to know the character's personality and traits really well and portray them throughout the design of the character's physical features, and it's actually a pretty complex job. Character designers are also not only used in animation. They can work on illustrations for publications and are also used in the initial concept art for live action movies and series. Any media that's going to use characters will probably use a character designer. Storyboard artists. This is like visual scripting, taking the script and drawing it out shot by shot in a storyboard. It covers the shots, angles, and actions in still images. It lets you see how the pacing and visuals, continuity, and narrative will work. It's a really important part of the pre-production process because it lets you see any issues before you've gotten too far into production, saving you a lot of time and money. The artists work closely with the director and scriptwriting teams to make sure that the narrative, pacing, action, and continuity make sense. Once they have the sequences laid out, they'll present it to the producers, directors, and story team and other executives for feedback and for everyone to be on board. If you have a knack for drawing and visual storytelling and you want to be involved in the animation process but you don't want to be an actual animator, then this could be a really good path for you. Animatic artists or editors. An animatic artist will take the storyboard and turn it into a simple, rough animation to map out the timing and action so the guesswork is taken out of how long each shot should be, and to ascertain how much time is going to go into creating shots, their complexity, how many resources will be needed, and all that sort of planning. This can also sometimes be an editor's role, and an editor will take the storyboard images and cut them together into a story reel. Sometimes all they'll do is have the timing of each shot with camera moves and cuts. Sometimes it'll include some key poses so the director and animator can get an accurate representation of the timing and actions. It's not fully animated though with all the actions and in-betweens, but it is the foundation for the rest of the animation, especially in film and animated series, and they try to make it as polished as possible to tell the story as accurately as they can for the rest of the team to work off of, and for investors and higher-ups to see with greater insight as to what the final product will look like. PreVis Artists, or pre-visualization artists. This team does the pre-visualization for 3D animation. It's the rough layout of the 3D scene and characters. It's almost like an animatic in that it's the step before the actual animation. They also work from the 2D storyboard and use that to plan out the camera shots, character actions and timing, and it serves the same purpose as a 2D animatic. It also allows the creative team to see where the visual effects are going to be in the shot and how to plan them around the animation. 3D modelers, sculptors, and asset or prop creators. These are the people who make the characters in 3D or the environments and props used in animation or games or pretty much anything CG. Everything you see in an animation or a movie or commercial with CG has been built by someone. CG modelers follow the concepts and references coming out of the look dev and design team And then once they're done, their models go to the texture artists and riggers. The modelers and sculptors are not usually the animators, at least not in a big film or game studio, although generalists do sometimes do everything in the creation process from start to finish. But the norm is to have different people in these roles. If you're a modeler, you can specialize even further and be a character or organic modeler or a hard surface modeler and do 3D props and environments. The cool thing about this is that you can also create assets to sell online as a side hustle, which people will then purchase to use in their own projects. You should also know how to texture and be knowledgeable about UV unwrapping if you're a modeler. In smaller production houses or media companies or places that are not creating these big budget films and series, there'll often be generalists who will model, rig, texture, and animate a character. So if you're interested in becoming a 3D generalist, then just be aware that you will need to be able to do all of these steps in the process. Riggers create the armature or skeleton for the character, which is what is used to move it and add keyframes to in the animation process. Rigging is used in both 2D and 3D animation. In 2D, you can have traditional cell animation, where it's drawn frame by frame, or you can have rigged characters, the same as with 3D. It's sometimes known as puppet animation. Rigging is viewed as a bit technical and requires precision, as the rig determines how the character can move and what the animation capabilities are. If it's a bad rig, there will be huge limitations when it comes to animation. So if you're technically minded and you like working out bugs and building systems, then becoming a rigger may be a good option for you. Texture artists create the textures for characters, environments, and props. It gets super detailed and in-depth, as you can't just slap on a texture and call it a day, at least if you have any self-pride and ever want to be a professional. Texture artists need to be really good with noticing details and have a good understanding of real-world materials and how they appear in different states and conditions. It's all about the nuances, and it's really important in creating a good-looking final animation product. Texturing can make or break a scene or character. It really is very important to have good texturing. Texture artists can also sometimes be the modeler and will create the entire asset. So if you want to be a texture artist, then you should also know how to 3D model. Texturing is needed wherever there is a CG or 3D model. So if you're creating architectural mock-ups or pre-visualizations, series, movies, games, anything, anywhere that there is any 3D content, you will need a texture artist. Lighting artists play a huge role in determining the mood and realism of a scene. Bad lighting can really ruin an otherwise good scene. I can't even tell you the amount of times that I get annoyed at watching something animated because it could be so much better if it just had better lighting. The lighting sets the tone and atmosphere and gives the scene depth. Good lighting lets you know what time of the day it is and what the mood of the scene is. Lighting artists are obviously really important in the final output of the scene and in ensuring coherence throughout the sequences. A lighting artist is kind of like a DOP or director of photography. If you're into photography and lighting effects, if you're into setting the scene and working with the textures, knowing about the shadows, time of day, and how to set the mood of the scene, then this could be a really good option for you. Animation director. Animation directors are responsible for the supervision and leadership of the team, working with the director and VFX supervisor. They're involved in all aspects of the animation process and have a lot of experience in animation, as well as with sourcing, casting, and creating the various animation teams. They also work closely with them to make sure that they get consistent, quality performances out of the animators. They work with each part of the creative team, establishing key character animation, reviewing all the creative and animation passes, approving rigs and character performance, and ensuring quality control throughout. It's a great position for someone who's been in the industry for a while already, who has good vision, great leadership skills, as well as good administration and people skills. 3D generalist. Being a 3D generalist means that you can do everything in the 3D pipeline if required. Of course, you have some things that you prefer doing over others, and there are things that you are better at than others, but you are capable of doing each step in the process quite well. As a generalist, you also have the option of niching down, so you could decide to specialize in being a modeler or a sculptor or a rigger, because you already have the experience in doing each of those things. So you could choose one and just focus on that if you wanted to. What's also cool is that you could also decide to go into an industry like architectural visualization, or you could specialize in doing 3D visualizations for manufacturing or engineering, or in the medical field. You could go into games, you could create and sell assets online. The skills you learn as a 3D generalist open a lot of doors for you. Voiceover artist. VR artists are usually hired per project and freelancing is very common. They'll go to a studio and record the voiceovers for the animations, or they might even have their own home studio, which is great for remote work. They can get work for movies, games and series obviously, but also for corporate animated work, infographics, commercials, basically any place where an animation of any kind requires a voiceover. If you've got a good voice, if you're good at reading and interpreting scripts and acting with your voice, if you know how to interpret characters and convey their emotions through your voice, then this could be a really good option for you. Sound designer. Sound designers for animation basically need to create everything from scratch because there's no natural sounds to work off of like there is with live action video. They need to know how to create the right ambience for an animated scene and have a cohesive sound design throughout the animation. They could work from a library of sounds or create the sounds themselves digitally, or they could record real-life sounds, which is known as Foley. It can be really fun, creative work when designing sound for animation, and you'd need to be pretty imaginative as well as having a good ear and knowledge on how to produce these sounds and what is best going to convey the right atmosphere for the scene and sound effects for characters. So these are just some of the roles and career possibilities available to you as someone who's interested in getting into the industry. There are obviously tons more, but this would be a really long ass video if I went into every single little option that's available to you. Hopefully this opened up some ideas for you and you can go and further research some of these things if they appeal to you or they gave you some ideas for more stuff that you could look into. Let me know in the comments what role you think would suit you and your talents. Maybe someone will be looking through the comments and see you and hit you up for a job or something. You never know what might happen. It's also good just to get to know the people in the community and the people around you in the industry. Thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, don't be shy to give it a little thumbs up and maybe subscribe if that floats your boat. Thanks for watching. Love ya. Bye.